From Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. Eric Atkinson with you. And ahead today, K-State's Dan O'Brien offering his weekly insight on the grain markets. Among other things, Dan will look at the question of whether late-planted corn will mature before the first freeze of the fall and how that could become a corn market factor in the weeks ahead. Following then, K-State's Robin Reid, looking at the just-released county rates for that next round of USDA Market Facilitation Program Payments. She'll go over the rate trends in Kansas and what she believes influenced those the most, and Robin will review the payment application procedure likewise. And in later, with the latest on Kansas agricultural weather, K-State's Mary Knapp. All that and more straight ahead on this Agriculture Today.
Hamburgers, roast, ribs, steak, or whatever you prefer. Beef, it's what's for dinner. Kansas cattle farmers produce 7.5 million head of cattle per year. It takes about 7 tablespoons of peanut butter to get the same amount of protein in 1 serving of lean beef. Support your local Kansas farmers and ranchers. Eat beef. This message was brought to you by the K-State Animal Sciences Leadership Academy participants.
Coming to you from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today. As always, we're glad to have you along with us. For openers, our weekly look at the grain markets. Dan O'Brien providing his input. He's a grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension, based in Northwest Kansas. If we were to put a descriptor on this trading week, we might say it was a pedestrian round of trading by and large, Dan. Not all that eventful.
I think we're waiting for the August crop report and to see how weather affects the crop as we go forward. Thoughts are that we'll see something akin to 8-10 million acres of prevented planted corn. There have been rumors in the last week that we'll have perhaps even less than that, even more than that in terms of prevented planted, less than that in terms of total plantings. Again, so if we started at about 92 million acres, we get down to 82 if it's 10 million less. Because of prevented plantings. If we go higher than that, do we go to 12, 13, 14, 15 million acres? There have been rumors of that occurring, and the pace of sign-up at FSA offices has been pretty brisk. They've had to change some of their sign-up rules to allow for more reports to be filed in a timely manner, with the idea that prevented planting numbers would be taken into account in that next USDA crop production report when we look at the acreage number. And then we've had a combination of hot weather that's helped to move the crop along some. There's still lingering questions about the maturity of the crop. Mm-hmm. We've tried to do some calculations here of late, particularly with corn, to look at what the chances are of getting to full maturity before a frost event, a killing frost event. And in doing that, I looked at, in our notes this week, those calculations, the difference between a May 15th planting and a June 1st planting for corn, both here, out in western Kansas, in Colby, Kansas, and Thomas County in particular, as opposed to DeKalb County, Illinois. And for those same dates, a little bit of a difference in terms of maturity of the corn, figuring 113-day corn here in Kansas, 108-day corn back there in Illinois. For a May 15th planting at 113-day maturity, you've got probably about a 55% chance that you'll reach physiological maturity if everything operates as we do normally. And you can see a number of years where even at May 15th at 113 days, we'd be struggling. If you put that same variety out onto June 1st, well, for 113 days, you have a high probability that you're not going to get to maturity. Mm-hmm. Of course, what our farmers did, they didn't wait and stand still with 113-day corn. They probably shortened up the maturity on the varieties. So if they did that, that would probably get them to maturity, before a frost, but they'll probably have sacrificed some yield potential. So what we see here is in some cases has happened in Kansas. When you go back into the heart of Illinois and really all those states heading to the east that are major corn states, Illinois, Indiana, some to the north, again, Michigan, parts of Minnesota, even South Dakota. When you look at at the difference between May 15th planting and June 1st, you're looking at a pretty rough situation in terms of the probability of getting to full maturity before a killing frost comes. So why bring that up? I think it's good for us to look at where corn prices are at now, or where they were yesterday, closed about $427.5 for D's corn, and ask whether lower acreage, the possibility of lower yields because of some of these late planting, wet soil challenges, and or the possibility of a shortened season because of frost before full maturity. What impact could that still have on the corn market heading off into fall? Mm-hmm. It just sounds like a person's banging the drum on every negative possibility. But the point is that we've got a lot of potential for great price volatility heading into fall, depending on how these things play out. And a frost event, or the threat of a frost event, could bring a lot of movement to the upside in the corn market. I guess we'll just have to see, but we are thankful to have gotten in what we have for the corn crop, and a good amount of it a couple weeks late. But even that's been planted is still in a lot of cases where they just got it in, again, latter part of May, early June. It still has to work its way through the variety of risks, particularly maturity risk, to get to the end.
Dan, that drum banging, as you put it, is apparently catching the ear of speculative traders for, as you note in your notes this week, the long positions in the corn market continue to expand.
Yes, and of course there are different types of traders: index traders, commercial traders, and managed money, or quote spec traders. Try to pay attention to what the spec traders are doing in particular, as their ear is quote on what potential directions the market is moving, as opposed to just trying to hedge the risk. And during March, April, early May, we had record bearish net short positions for these spec traders. And now, as we're coming into the first part of June, all that's been wiped away, and we're net long on the spec positions. Not record net long, more along the lines of 400 to 500 million contracts. But the point is that, gee whiz, that sentiment that was so bearish is now kind of evaporated. And when you try to break apart the spec longs versus the spec shorts, it's not that the spec longs have really jumped to the higher side, but it's the short positions, the sell positions, have really kind of evaporated. Have dropped from about 2.5 billion bushels down to, as a net, about 300-400 million. So the negative, bearish players in the market aren't feeling that that's a strong position to have, and so they've kind of evaporated, got out of their positions. And if anything, again, when you look at that info, we're just sort of aiming for the time in the markets in August, at least, when we start to get more solid, substantive information. So August is really shaping up to be a market directing, pivotal time in the corn market, and not just for corn. There'll be an impact in the other requisite markets. Again, there'll be a carryover impact on corn into the wheat market. If we're short on corn, and we'll be pulling more wheat into feed channels, that would affect the wheat market. I think the soybean market will stand or fall on its own two legs. It's already also has some shorter acreage and has some of its own production questions. But again, a lot of eyes right now are on the corn market, and wondering how the acreage and the yield prospects are going to work out as we move on into the rest of this year.
Well, good news. Pretty solid week, you tell us, for hard red wheat exports.
Yes. In the week ending July 18th, we exported about 10.3 million bushels of hard red winter wheat, and the pace we need to meet the USDA's projections just a little over 7. So in the markets, as they've been struggling to see much movement for U.S. exports, to have a week like that's a pretty good thing. Of course, that happens at a time when we're just coming out of harvest. Prices have, again, been dealing with some harvest pressures, et cetera. So if you're a buyer and you need wheat, when do you buy wheat? Well, you buy it when you think the prices are probably going to be lowest, and lo and behold, that's happening in about the last 2 weeks of hard red winter wheat harvest, when we're trying to figure out what to do with all the supplies we have, especially in areas like in parts of western Kansas where we've had such great yields. So that's good news. And overall, and for all the U.S., we're looking at about 18.2 million bushels, which is right on pace to meet the USDA's projections. So that's positive, I think, for the wheat market. We're seeing some export movements. We'll be trying to work our way through the varying protein outcomes for the 2019 Kansas Central Southern Plains wheat crop for a good while. It is noteworthy that when you look up to the Dakotas, they're having the spring wheat tours now, and some decent yields, not bin-buster yields, high 30s, low 40s. So a good report, not a crisis report coming from that area, but also not yields that are absolute record highs. They've had to deal with some stress and other issues up in that area, and it's showing on their yield numbers.
And just a parting thought on the soybean trade. Again, here's a market that's biding time, by and large.
It does seem like that's the case, and we have seen some lower export numbers in it. It's exported about 23 million bushels this last week, but that's behind about the 38 to 40 we need to meet the USDA's projections. Apparently a weaker week of exports for soybean meal bled over and affected soybean futures prices. We do hear ongoing discussion about U.S.-China trade issues, and it seems about once or twice a week there's a rumor that China has stated, well, we're going to come back into the market, buy some soybeans to, I guess, show goodwill coming into the next round of trade negotiations, which sounds like now are going to happen at the end of the month, unless they be canceled or something. So perhaps the biggest issue that's out there is the possibility of some resumption of goodwill and business between the U.S. and China. But again, those rumors have been regularly hitting us or hitting that soybean market for the last 1 or 2 or 3 months in a row. So I don't know that there'll be a lot of credence given to those type of potential positives until they actually start to see the business happen.
Very well. Dan, thank you for your time and your comments.
Thanks, Eric. Take care.
Dan O'Brien, grain market economist, K-State Research and Extension with us. Well, the anticipation over those Market Facilitation Program payments from the USDA is over. Those rates have been announced, and we'll cover that next on Agriculture Today. Agricultural producers, landowners, and creditors, you have a partner in your legal and financial needs. Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services offers reliable, trusted information and guidance. Whether you need advice for ag credit concerns or are transitioning your operation to the next owner, Kansas Agricultural Mediation Services can assist you in making sound decisions for your business. To learn more, call 800-321-3276 or visit us online. Agriculture Today continues now here on the K-State Radio Network. Well, long-awaited news out of the U.S. Department of Agriculture came forth yesterday, midday, as the department announced the payment rates for the Market Facilitation Program, or Trade Aid, as it's commonly referred to. And it's broken down county by county across the states and the nation. And we'll take a look at the Kansas numbers from that announcement. Robin Reid has joined us, an agricultural economist, K-State Research and Extension. She works directly with farm programs on a constant basis here. And Robin, this in fact is a pretty big item because these are instrumental payments to the farm economy in Kansas, are they not?
Absolutely. We've been long awaiting this information ever since Secretary Sonny Perdue announced it on May 23rd that there'd be another round of payments to help assist farmers during the trade war that is still ongoing with China. So we've been kind of trying to follow this and get some idea of what these payments might be. As we were talking before the program, we know last year these made up 37% of the net farm income of our Kansas Farm Management Association farms on average. So this was a big payment for farmers last year and certainly a big assistance in this downturn in the farm economy. So having a second round of these payments is going to be instrumental to our Kansas and our U.S. farm economy.
Now, to remind, these payments this go-round are constituted differently as compared with the previous initial round of payments, right?
Yes. So when these were announced, I'm sure everybody remembers we were trying to get a crop in the ground still. With the wet spring across the Midwest, it was just a struggle. And when they announced these, they were cognizant of trying to not disturb the planting intentions of farmers. So it is not a payment rate per commodity this time around as it was last year. Last year we had a rate for corn and soybeans and so forth. This time it's a single county rate that's going to be multiplied by the number of planted acres each farm had of covered commodities. And that number can also not exceed the 2018 plantings. So again, just to emphasize that, it's a single county rate multiplied by the farm's total planting of eligible crops in 2019.
Now, how those individual rates were devised?
Yeah, so my understanding of how that was calculated is they looked at the planting history of each county and kind of the average commodity mix that county had had in the past. And then I'm sure behind the scenes there's a rate per commodity planted that they use to calculate an aggregate number per county. But as we look across the state at the different rates, I'm sure a lot of that comes down to the mix of soybeans that are planted in that county and other crops and the various levels that they've been impacted by the trade dispute.
Mm-hmm. And that was your first blush reaction to the numbers when you looked at those different rates across the state of Kansas, that there are some stark differences even with adjacent counties here and there.
Yes. So the first thing I did when I saw these rates is draw a map of Kansas and label them per county because it's hard in a list to see any trends. And we will have this map and some more information available on agmanager.info, or you can look up your own number on farmers.gov/MFP for your county. But looking across the state, some general trends, the ones that really stand out, we have some $70 payments in Ford County, Donovan County, some near that in Clay County, Franklin County, Johnson County. Some of our bigger soybean producing counties across the state obviously had some bigger payments. The ones that stand out as being lower, Harper at $22 per acre in that county, Kingman 28, Barber 27. And then there's a pocket again up in the northwest where we have Decatur County at 25, Thomas at 31, Norton at 30. So there's a pocket in kind of south central and northwest that are lower than the rest of the state. Again,
where soybeans may be a lesser grown commodity.
That is my assumption, yes.
Again, the map will be available if you'd like to look at that at agmanager.info very shortly. Some other details that are worth bringing out as well, Robin. For those who were prevented from planting in the spring and went ahead and sowed a cover crop on that acreage with USDA clearance, those will be eligible, those acres, for payments likewise, right?
Yeah, and we kind of got an indication that this was coming, but now we can actually see it in writing that producers that were affected and had prevented planting claims and then planted an MFP-eligible cover crop with the potential to harvest it for forage will qualify for a $15 per acre payment. And those have to be planted by August 1st. So there is a little bit of time here if you do have prevented planting ground and haven't got the cover crop on yet, that you can still be eligible through that program.
But that is a flat fee of $15 per acre.
That is our understanding, yes. Yeah, and all across the nation, these MFP payments actually range from $15 up to $150 per acre. Again, the highest we've seen here in Kansas is just a little bit over $70 per acre. But the way these are going to be paid, we've had some indication early on of this, but now that we kind of know for certain, they're going to be paid in 3 installments. So the first one is going to be 50% of what the producer's calculated payment would be, or $15 per acre, whatever is the higher of those two. And that's going to be made in mid to late August.
Right away.
Yes. Now, the other 2 installments they could make if the marketing conditions persist, that the trade dispute is still going on, and at that time they'll evaluate if they make those second and third installments. And those, if they do happen, would be made in November and early January. So obviously we won't know the total amount that'll come out of this program, but we do know at least 50% of it will be paid up front in mid to late August.
And just to note, sign-up is immediate here this coming Monday. It opens.
So it starts Monday, July 29th, and ends December 6th, 2019. So there's plenty of time to go ahead and get signed up for it.
Robin, some other finer details. Some limitations on an individual producer's income weaved within this?
Yeah, so a lot of these programs have an adjusted income limit of $900,000, and this includes the MFP program. And that's adjusted gross income looking at tax years 2014, 15, and 16. Now, another thing in this is at least 75% of your adjusted gross income must be from farming or ranching. So this is definitely a farm and ranch program. You also have to be in conservation compliance and have a farm number with Farm Service Agency. But as you can see, these are pretty loose restrictions, so most of our farmers will be eligible for these payments.
And lest we overlook it, there is relief as well in this round of payments for certain livestock producers.
Yes, so dairy and hogs also had MFP payments last year, and they are again announcing payments for this 2019 MFP. And on the dairy program, that's going to be 20 cents per hundredweight, and that's based on the production history of the farm. On hogs, it's going to be $11 per head, and that's on the number of live hogs that were owned on the day selected by the producer between April 1st and May 15th of this year.
And we might note, although we won't get into the details, a number of other specialty crops are included in this as well. So folks will need to check with their local FSA for that eligibility.
Yeah, so there's a complete list. I won't go through it all online. At that farmers.gov/MFP, you can look at the specialty crops. One thing I will mention on calculating your county rate, it's based on that rate times your planted acres of the covered commodities. And so, not to list them all, but here in Kansas, some of those would include alfalfa hay, canola, corn, oats, grain sorghum, soybeans, sunflower seed, upland cotton, wheat, kind of all of our normal Kansas commodities. But one you might not think of is that alfalfa hay is actually being included in that for planted acres as well.
Now, what we know of the application process, because of the simplified elements of this, it should be fairly straightforward, do you think, in terms of actually completing the application for these?
I believe so, because you had to report your planted acres to FSA by, I believe, a week ago. That date's escaping me right now. But those records should be on hand with Farm Service Agency already. So it's not going to be like last time where you had to produce evidence of the yield that you got on each of your commodities. It should be a much more simplified process this time around.
And that will allow for the turnaround time being somewhat swift in as far as those payments being made. You say once again, Robin, that you and colleagues in agricultural economics will be posting still more information on these payments?
We will definitely be following everything on this program as it develops. And the first big thing right now is just seeing these county rates. I've had a lot of questions from lenders that are wanting to put these numbers in cash flows and farmers that just want to know what this amount will be. And we've had no certainty to provide up until this time. So it's very exciting to finally see some county numbers. As
of yesterday, midday, that certainty came forth. Thanks, Robin, and we'll be talking again soon, undoubtedly. Appreciate your time.
All right. Thank you, Eric.
Agricultural economist Robin Reid of K-State Research and Extension. Again yesterday, the U.S. Department of Agriculture announcing those eagerly awaited payment rate levels for the Market Facilitation Program county by county across the state and the nation. And to note, according to the USDA's announcement, about $8.5 billion in payments to producers who applied for the program in 2018. We shall see what transpires with the payout in 2019. We'll be back with more on Agriculture Today. You're listening to the K-State Radio Network.
What is radon? Home exposure to radon gas is the leading cause of lung cancer death in the United States for non-smokers. In Kansas, 1 in 4 homes will test at or above the EPA action level. The Surgeon General recommends all homes be tested and fixed if necessary. Visit kansasradonprogram.org for more information. Test, fix, save a life. This message brought to you by the Kansas Radon Program, the Kansas Association of Broadcasters, and this station.
Broadcasting from the campus of Kansas State University, this is Agriculture Today, and welcome back. Eric Atkinson here, as we turn now to today's agricultural news headlines for you, these courtesy in part of DTN. Well, the Democrat chairs of 4 House Agriculture subcommittees voiced criticism of the USDA's second trade aid package after the department unveiled the payment rates and the other details yesterday. The joint statement was issued by Representatives Jim Costa, the chair of the Subcommittee on Livestock and Foreign Agriculture, Marcia Fudge, the chairman of the Subcommittee on Nutrition Oversight and Department Operations, Philemon Vela, who is the chair of the Subcommittee on General Farm Commodities and Risk Management, and Stacy Plaskett, the chair of the Subcommittee on Biotechnology, Horticulture, and Research. Quoting those lawmakers, while these second Market Facilitation Program payments will undoubtedly help farmers in tough economic conditions, they continue to tell us loudly and clearly they want fair access to global markets and not handouts from the federal government. Of particular concern, this group of lawmakers goes on to say, is the fairness and the equity of payments across crops and commodities, including specialty crops, dairy, and livestock products. They went on to say that they also worry about how the aid package will affect the U.S. World Trade Organization commitments, especially given concerns raised by our trading partners, they say, after the first round of trade aid. The lawmakers reiterated calls for the president to end the trade war, arguing, again quoting, it isn't accomplishing anything but added pain for our farmers. Now, the Market Facilitation Program is just one part of the three-pronged approach within the USDA's trade mitigation packages for last year and recently announced for this year, as we hear now from the USDA's Rod Bain.
Although most of the focus on USDA's latest trade mitigation package centers on the Market Facilitation Program, 2 programs carried over from the first package in 2018 also assist producers impacted by trade disruptions. The Food Purchase and Distribution Programs will continue to purchase impacted commodities for distribution to schools, food banks, and outlets serving low-income individuals. Yet Acting Deputy Undersecretary Brandon Lipp says new this year is an expanded domestic commodity donation program.
We provide USDA the flexibility to access additional outlets that serve low-income individuals but have not previously had access to these foods, but only in the event that our traditional F&S programs are unable to use all of the foods provided to them through this program.
And the Agricultural Trade Promotion Program continues providing cost-share opportunities for commodity promotion and marketing organizations to establish new export markets. I'm Rod Bain reporting for the U.S. Department of Agriculture in Washington, D.C.
Bayer Ag has succeeded in getting a third large trial verdict substantially reduced in litigation over the safety of the herbicide glyphosate. A California state judge in Alameda County yesterday trimmed more than $2 billion award down to $86.5 million in that case of the husband and wife who each blamed non-Hodgkin's lymphoma diagnoses on exposure to Roundup. Last week, a federal judge in San Francisco reduced a more than $80 million verdict down to just over $25 million in the case of a Northern California resident with similar allegations. Bayer is now appealing or plans to appeal the verdicts, which have each been lowered by the judges who oversaw the trials. Judge Winifred Smith denied a request by Bayer to completely throw out the verdict in the case of Alva and Alberta Pilliod, a married couple in their 70s who used Roundup on their property near San Francisco for 35 years. Those two diagnosed with lymphoma 4 years apart, and both are in remission now. The judge found the evidence presented at trial supported the jury's finding that Roundup caused the Pilliods to get cancer and that Monsanto, the previous owner of the Roundup brand, failed to warn about potential harms. The judge writing that there is evidence that Monsanto had information that was not available to the scientific or medical community and that it sought to impede, discourage, or distort scientific inquiry and the resulting science, in the judge's words. Bayer said yesterday the reduced verdict is a step in the right direction, but continues to believe the verdict and damages are not supported by the evidence at trial and conflict with the, as they say, extensive body of reliable science and conclusions of leading health regulators. Quick calendar item. You range managers, you can take part in a couple of the range management schools coming up, put on by the Grazing Lands Coalition. K-State is a contributor to that coalition. One will be taking place August 6th through the 8th at the Ringneck Ranch near Tipton, and the other will take place at Camp Wood near Elmdale August 20th through the 22nd. You can find out more information about these at kglc.org, kglc.org. All you wheat producers are invited to take in a special event on August the 12th, just south of Wichita. Experts will be sharing up-to-date information on a variety of wheat production topics. Marcia Boswell has more on this week's Kansas Wheat Scoop. Marcia?
There is no charge to attend the Sorghum U Wheat U educational event on August 14th at the Kansas Star Event Center in Mulvane, and lunch will be provided. Wheat and sorghum producers can take home real-world practical solutions that can have a definite influence on their bottom line. Producers can develop a strategy that will allow them to take control and plan for profit. Having multiple sessions and speakers filled with knowledge, this event will benefit any farmer that attends. Registration begins at 8:30 a.m. with the program starting at 9. During the welcome session, attendees will hear from a panel of farmers. During breakout blocks 1 and 2, farmers will be able to choose from the following 4 sessions: Making Sense of Blockchain Technology, Make Cropping Systems Work for You, Lessons in Wheat Production, and Risk Management for Sorghum Producers. These blocks will repeat, so farmers will have the opportunity to attend 2 of the 4. Over lunch, Arlen Suderman, Chief Commodities Economist with Intel FC Stone, will present the keynote address on market intelligence for the future. Market intelligence helps producers plan ahead for influences on grain markets that are out of a producer's control. Suderman has years of experience working with farmers and helping them understand the markets. From late planting problems this spring to trade wars to African swine fever, Suderman will give producers an outlook that will help them make sound decisions. Following Suderman's presentation, John Lawrence will be speaking on IntelliFarm's Growing with a Purpose. Topics for breakout blocks 3 and 4 include planning with your lender, making the grain chain work for you, risk management for wheat producers, and growing forage sorghum for profit. For more information on the speakers and topics, and to register for this free event, go to wheatu.com. For Kansas Wheat, I'm Marcia Boswell.
Thanks, Marcia. And this is Agriculture Today.
Agriculture and food systems are the main drivers of the Kansas economy, but must be improved in order to feed the world's growing population. How are we going to do so? Reduce food loss, find ways to preserve grasslands, and help families stretch their dollars. Global food systems is one of the 5 grand challenges K-State Research and Extension is addressing. To learn more, visit www.ksre.ksu.edu.
Now on Agriculture Today, our weekly segment on Kansas agricultural weather for you. Mike's side, Mary Knapp, climatologist, K-State Research and Extension. And Mary, on the heels of the brutal hot weather that we endured last week, it's been awfully pleasant this past week around the state.
Right. Let's check in with the heat that we had to end last week. We should note that it was not a particularly long stretch of hot weather, but it got very, very hot. Mm-hmm. In the western divisions, all 3 of them had at least one location that got to 107.
That's actual temperature.
That's actual temperatures. That's not the heat index. That's the thermometer reading. Central divisions all also topped 100 degrees or better. The only division that did not see a 100-plus reading was in the East Central, and they got to 99. There was probably a spot someplace that hit the 100-degree mark. We simply didn't have a thermometer there to record it. But it's July, and we'll have to check and see whether we set any records. We might have on individual stations, particularly if their record period doesn't go back to the 30s. So it was hot. But then we had the rain and the frontal system that came through on Sunday. It brought rain to the western portions of the state and to the extreme eastern portions of the state. Unfortunately, in the central areas, it was more a case of cooling off the temperatures rather than actually getting any productive rainfall out of it.
Now, the rain in the fringes of the state, so to say, pretty healthy in those locations, right?
Right. So we had some places that saw several inches of rain, even in west central Kansas, where the Tribune area reported more than an inch of rain. Fairly widespread, quarter to a half an inch of rain. Again, mostly along the fringes, northwest, west central, and southwest, and then again in eastern Kansas. But in the eastern Kansas area, it was more along the Missouri River Basin. Johnson County in particular was an area that saw multiple stations with 2.5 to 3 inches of rainfall. And again, another pocket in southeast Kansas where over an inch of rain was reported at multiple locations. When we look at the statewide average, 36/100ths of an inch for the week ending on Tuesday, 43% of normal. So better than last week, but not nearly so evenly distributed and still well below what we would typically see for this time of the year.
But just to put it in context, we're nowhere near falling back to a drought situation anywhere in the state, are we?
Well, we're not. This is where it's going to be really tricky. If we talk about the entire soil profile, we're not anywhere near drying that out, although it is drying down to a deeper level. But unfortunately, we've got a lot of the spring planted crops that don't have their normal root development. So when that top 2 to 4 inches is drying out at the rate that it is, they simply don't have access to the deeper soil moisture. And so we're beginning to see signs of what would be called drought stress. The question is how much of it is heat stress versus how much of it is inability to get to the water. And either way, it's likely to cause some problems with reduced yields. If, for example, the corn is far enough along, and there's been some reports of the corn in dough stage, it may result in lower kernel weight. So that is going to be a problem, and it's most concentrated in that central part of the state where they've missed out on more of those and they've had the warmer temperatures. So that's going to be a double whammy.
On the upside, though, the cool down this week, that was beneficial to that corn that was in the reproductive stage. You have an update article out of the agronomy department coming out later today to that effect.
Right. Ignacio and I have an article coming out looking at the environmental stresses on that. Corn has been interesting this year in that we've got a wide range of maturities depending upon when they were able to get it planted and get it up. So there are spots where the fields are already, as I said, in dough stage or later, but there are places where the corn is just beginning to tassel. Right. This week has been perfect weather for that corn that is in the tassel to kernel set phase. Highs, in the lower 80s and lows in the 50s give it perfect conditions for that. Not quite so perfect if you're talking sorghum. You're not accumulating the growing degree units at the rate that you would typically expect, and that's going to further delay that crop. And again, it was already late. This is not exactly ideal for getting it finished before our typical freeze dates. So that will be a concern. It's kind of a trade-off. On a more positive note, we are expected to warm back up into close to normal temperatures for the weekend. We're looking for highs in the 90s and lows in the upper 60s, which, again, would be more favorable for those warm season crops and won't be super detrimental for the corn. The negative is that the outlook for precipitation is, again, not very favorable. The best chances for significant moisture are along the eastern border, again, in that Donovan, Leavenworth, Atchison County, down to probably Johnson County. That little pocket may see as much as a half an inch or more. But for most of the state, the quantitative precip forecast is for nothing.
And we're hoping that we're not entering a prolonged dry spell in Kansas. The August outlook maintains yet that it could be wetter than normal, but...
Right. The August outlook does still continue to favor cooler and wetter than normal, but the 8 to 14-day outlook, which carries us through the first week in August, is favoring warmer than normal temperatures and a slight chance for drier than normal precipitation levels.
Well, once again, corn growers, have a look at that article that Mary and Ignacio have co-authored in the e-update newsletter, which will be posted on agronomy.ksu.edu later on today on the state of corn. And Mary, as always, much obliged. We'll welcome you back next Friday.
Thanks, Eric.
Climatologist Mary Knapp, K-State Research and Extension on Kansas agricultural weather, and that'll do it for our Friday edition. A good weekend to you. Eric Atkinson here. This has been Agriculture Today over the K-State Radio Network.